You're welcome to the Economy and Politics Conversation. I'm Ottoabasi Abasiekong. This edition will discuss rising energy costs and implications for businesses in Nigeria. Joining me virtually for this conversation is Mr. Muktar Mohammed, an energy analyst. It's great to have you once again on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much to discuss this very important subject. Let's begin by asking, how would you assess the impacts of the current policy reforms on households, particularly as it relates to the standards and cost of living? I know you're aware of the latest gross domestic product figure, which shows Nigeria's economy grew by 3.84% in the fourth quarter of 2024. How, especially from the downstream and of course the foreign exchange reforms, how have they played out so far?
Well, if you're talking about the foreign exchange reform, I don't think that really played a role in bringing where we are today. I think it's largely driven by what we have seen in the service sector, which is driven by the financial sector, especially the insurance sectors. And the financial sector, this is largely due to the recent recapitalization directive from the Central Bank of Nigeria. And the insurance sector also due to the policy of the federal government for third-party, composite third-party insurance for every motorist in the streets in any part of Nigeria. I think that has been responsible for the kind of growth that we have seen in those in these two sectors which have a very positive impact on the GDP. When you look at the downstream or the energy sector, yes, you could say that there's been a slight reduction in the price of PMS. But when you compare that in terms of inflation and what he has done for the people, you realize that it's very marginal, because the people are also suffering from other issues that is not making us feel the impact of the PMS reduction in prices.
Very, very clear. The impact is still a bit felt, but we need to see much of the impact positive on the households and cost of living, which of course is a major issue of discussion. But let's get down to our conversation for today. High energy costs impede the sustainability and expansion of both large and small businesses. What is your perspective on how this has played out for businesses in the country so far? Look at the Central Bank of Nigeria Purchasing Managers Index for January 2025. It showed that it went up to 50.25 points, but one of the issues and concerns raised was inadequate power supply.
Well, I think power is an ongoing discussion, and I mean, we've had that conversation for a long time, and I don't think we should expect magic transformation in the power sector. Because it involves a lot of investment, and some of these investments are still not there yet, especially when you talk about investment that has to do with capital injection funding. It's not yet there yet. We've seen the government talked about increase in tariff, but again, increase in tariff will come commensurate with delivery of services. And delivery of services can only improve when you begin to see infrastructure in the power sector improve. As it stands now, those are major challenge for the power sector. So I'm not surprised what we are seeing in terms of the impact in rising costs and other issues, despite the positivity that we have seen from the consumer price index. I think again, when you look at that positivity, also you should also look at the earning ability of the average Nigeria. What we are seeing that is called positivity, yes, largely driven because of the slight reduction that we have seen in the exchange rate. So it's playing a large role in making it like we have had an improvement in the consumer price index per session, and also adaptation. Again, a lot of people have adapted to the new style. And you know, when you're coming from a very low figure, it seems to be better when you have marginal increase. But I think we'll begin to see how impactful these are, looking at the rebasing that have gone on, and then seeing what the CBN recent policy of leaving all variables as they were before they were in the last MPC meeting. So maybe from there we'll begin to see how impactful that has been. But for the cost of energy, of course, it's an ongoing discussion. It's an ongoing cost on a lot of businesses and households, because it's relatively not available. When it's available now, it's very expensive also.
Yes, you just rightly talked about high energy costs, and even the telecommunications industry have also felt that impact as part of the issues they've raised in cost of doing business, which of course you've seen the issues around tariffs that they are considering, which is being debated. It's really a huge challenge. There are increasing calls from manufacturers to other stakeholders to review the privatization of the power sector, distribution, and even generation segments. Some analysts even argue for a regional approach to power sector investments. Example is the South-South. If the whole South-South region, like from Akwa Ibom Rivers to Delta, the axis can take holding of the Port Harcourt Distribution Company, or for example, Southeastern states take holding of the Enugu Distribution Company, or even North Central take hold of the Jos Distribution Company. There's this call for a holistic review of the privatization and more involvement in distribution and, of course, the generation activities. What are your thoughts on this? Because the entire organized private sector is not really happy with the privatization of the power sector process, the impact.
I think if we keep on talking about this problem, there won't be a solution. There's already a legislation that says state can also be able to generate power, but how much of that have they been able to achieve? Because like I always said, I think we had this conversation when that bill came out and when the president signed it into law. I said how many states will be able to embark on those projects, and we are beginning to see it now that it's not power sector investment. It's not child play. There's a lot of it in the state are struggling to even pay minimum wage, regardless of beginning to get involved in the power sector. Address now. What we should do immediately is to begin to look at giving more licenses to maybe to private sectors, and I think that should be a solution rather than saying no, revoke the current license. Distribution seems to have more challenges than generation. So, but when you look at the generation side, have not yet been privatized. Government is still largely one in charge of generation. I think that's the space that we need government to get off there, get capable private sector to see how they can improve our generation capability. And after that, then you begin to talk about distribution, maybe getting new players. You see, you have to make the power sector more competitive. Instead of having just equal electricity, and also you have Ikeja electricity. Even if you have a third player like Lagos State government is trying to partner with the private sector to come up with their own and then begin to compete in terms of price, in terms of services. That's the only way we can deal with the private sector reform. But if you are calling that, oh, we should revoke the former privatization, we shouldn't do it again, I think we won't be taken serious, especially when it comes to international investors. They will just feel that, okay, whatever policy that was embarked upon, when a new administration comes in, they could just stop it, and that also will affect their business. I think what we should do is to get large players. During this privatization, remember it happened during the term of President Goodluck Jonathan. Yeah. I think it's high time we see how we can get more players into the private sector.
And also, let's look at the fact that we've seen a $23 billion federal government transformative power sector initiative come on board. Analysts say, well, it's good. It could catalyze the country's ailing power sector. But do you think this is enough to address a decade-long power challenge? You've just talked about the issues of the generation and distribution. Transmission is one area. And Mr. Muktar, two major investors in that in the power sector, generation. That's Mr. Tony Lumelu from the Transcorp axis, and of course, Mr. Femi Otedola from Geregu, have also talked about the need for government to look at how transmission can have some private sector investment, some kind of co-ownership. Have we come to that point now?
I think when you talk about, I think the transmission sector is already private sector driven. Maybe they are talking about generation, because I think distribution is already in the private sector. That's why you have equal electricity. Yeah. So maybe they are looking at generation, because what happened is that some of these private sector, even when they generate, they have to transfer to sell to the federal government for them to distribute. I think what they are trying to say is that can we have everybody there, that okay, you have generation, you have distribution, and everybody have to come in there. But the $23 billion investment, I think it will go a long way. It might not be the solution, but maybe a starting point. But my challenge is when you see government begin to throw money at almost every issue, it's a big challenge, because the government is supposed to create that enabling environment to attract private sector. They don't have those funding. Globally, now government have realized that they don't have the funding to carry out a lot of activities. So they are doing the PPP, trying to make sure that they get private sector into most of their key infrastructural development. Even great nations like the United States that have all the available, but they are doing that. So I think what we should do is looking at that 25 billion, how much is coming. If government alone is bringing $25 billion, that is very interesting and that's sweet. And then we begin to think that the private sector could bring more, and that could just address our problem. But the challenge is when you look at our reserve of about 40 billion, and if government is going to bring in $24 billion, then what is left in the reserve? And so that what we are going to see is that most likely government will keep borrowing to meet up their own obligation. I think this 25 billion might be a PPP side of it. Maybe government is thinking to partner with the private sector. If that is a drive towards it, I think that would be nice. But if it's just government looking at 25 billion from their own side, that means they have to go borrowing, and that will not be good for the Nigerian economy in the long term.
Yes, we understand it's a public-private partnership. Private sector will bring a good chunk of that amount, and it's also going to include renewable energy, which is something you talked about last time. If you want to speak a bit on that, the component of renewable energy. And what I meant about the transmission is that for now, government is so much in transmission. We've seen the challenges of the grid and all those issues of collapse and all that, but private sector wants to get on board.
Well, I think private sector can get on board. It will be good, whereby you could have more backup. And knowing the fact that most of the GENCOs are also run by private sector, if Ikeja Electricity could also be the one trying to generate their own transmission backup, so that they are able to generate and then transmit, and I mean that would be good. We could have a one-off shop electricity company like what we are having in the financial sector, where most of the financial sector are having holding companies whereby they are involved in various activities. I think that should be a model that we should try to tickle with in the power sector. And I think it will work, because in developed country, it has worked. So I don't see any reason why I think totally agree with that. And again, once it's a private sector driven, you attract the right investors to want to come and to be in that space, because we have seen that in the financial space also, where you get a lot of people coming in there and trying to be part of it. So it is good if it can work out fine. I think that would be nice.
Yeah, very well. We've seen that those two generation companies, for example, Transcorp and Geru, are listed on the markets. Even North-South Power also has come on the market. So we need to see some activity in transmission, because there's so much gap in terms of funding that needs to be done, and government cannot do it alone. So it's time government comes on board, like you said, to work with private sector to address the gaps in transmission. Recently, Oluveheyan, the special advisor to the president on energy, stated that federal government's power sector priorities include working towards a targeted subsidy system to ensure that low-income households receive the most support, like you stated earlier. But currently, it is estimated that the government spends about 200 billion naira monthly on electricity subsidies. Do you believe in this subsidy approach? And how can we handle the fiscal support incentives better in the power sector? You said earlier that we should not be throwing money anyhow, but the subsidy and then also the enablers for private sector.
Look, anything subsidy that is being run by government is always not efficient. You know our history of the subsidy. At a point, you see that you'll be getting 100 million barrels, 100 million liters every. That's what we are consuming, even when a lot of people do not even have car. And since it has gone to the private sector, that government have removed their hands off subsidy, we realize that the liters have reduced. So that tells you that there's been a lot of corruption in the system. Subsidy that is not backed with strong database in terms of knowing who and who is supposed to enjoy this subsidy, it's not subsidy. Because again, when you look at some of this subsidy, if it is driven towards the rural area, then that would be fantastic. And the rural area, how many of them really have power if you go to the rural areas? So it's a major challenge when you come with subsidy and you don't have the data to back up what you are subsidizing, where you are subsidizing. Let me talk about subsidy, electricity subsidy. So where are the poor staying? Where are the rich staying? How do you quantify that? Because in some other places, there is talk like a place like Lagos. It's a mix. It's mixed depending on your ability, because somebody can have a single room apartment in a neighborhood that you think they are high net individuals living there, but they also have some other people that are also living in that place that are that are not high net individuals. So when you talk about subsidy for me, in terms of government subsidy, has not been effective. And I don't think if you are beginning to throw that, remember before now they said they were paying so high in subsidy, so they have to get a lot of people into band A. Today now, even at the people in band A, you have seen that the subsidy has even increased. So where did they get the new people to add up? Is it that they are giving them more power? You and I know that areas that are not under band A suffer to really get power even in 2 or 3 hours. So it's when you call about subsidy, I think when you begin to make subsidy, categorize subsidy, then it's a problem. You need to say, okay, if you want to give subsidy, how do you now make sure that it's across board? Because everybody needs subsidy in one way or the other. How do you make sure it's across board so that you don't give room for people to begin to take advantage of the system? So for subsidy as it stands now does not work, because again, you cannot even tell me who are those less vulnerable, where they live in Lagos. Some areas in Ikorodu are even in band A. So if Ikorodu, some areas in Ikorodu are already in band A. So how did you quantify who is low income? Why are you? So for me, the subsidy scheme is not working, and I don't think it's something that government should continue. But government should look at ways that they could get everybody on board, get your hand off subsidy, and use those money for social investment in health and education. That would be better than putting it in a sector that you have already given to the private sector.
Okay, very interesting. Mr. Muktar, this is 2025, and a lot of expectations. What must happen this year? What's the outlook that will make the energy sector vibrant and, of course, support that anticipated growth? We are at 3.84%, and it is said that if we have efficient power available to the business community and households, it could really improve by 2% addition. Maybe we talk of 4 to 5% growth. But also, we face several challenges. Regulation is also critical, like you said last time we had this conversation. You talked about metering, and now we're even seeing that the NERC, the regulator, is saying all refunds from the discos must be documented, which of course I feel that should be a positive development. But from your part, from regulation to operators to the overall power sector value chain, what is important to be done that will make this sector vibrant and power economy in 2025?
We need to look at the effects. We have to stabilize effects, because most of the equipment or most of the machinery that are needed are going to be coming from outside the shore of this country. So FX is one. How will government be able to provide FX, available FX, so that we can maintain the current momentum in terms of bringing down of the exchange rate? If that is done, that will help reduce costs, and also that will help improvement in service delivery, like you have pointed out. Service delivery is key. And then the integrity of the regulators in terms of making sure that the operators are operating according to the rule that have been set up. You just made mention of what they just said of recent about metering, which is very, very good. So we need to see more of that, where regulators are on top of their game, making sure that operators are delivering in all the variables that they are supposed to deliver. For me, that is also key. So, but I think the most thing that will really make that sector to really strive this year will be a stable exchange rate, and even a reduced exchange rate. If we are able to get that exchange rate to BRF minimum between 1,000 to 1,002, that will help reduce costs. And then we will not be having this issue of having some in band A, having some in band B, because the whole idea of that, you said, what there was an exchange rate cost in terms of the cost. It's called the exchange rate. You have had these companies incurring more costs. So by doing that, then you reduce costs, and then you could be able to say, okay, now we have brought down these costs. We have been able to maintain stability. Costs of all these goods are not as high they used to be, because exchange rate is now lower. Then also you also look at the other aspects of service delivery, and especially from the area of the operator. Then the regulators also, you make sure that, like I said, what the operators say they will do, they do. So by that, you see that it will not just be 2%. I can tell you, any developed economy, any economy that have moved from developing economy to a developed economy, have paid more emphasis on power, and they have not regretted it. I think, but these three variables need to be taken care of in our own case. In other people's case, I think they were looking at service delivery and operation or regulator efficiency and service efficiency. But in our own case, we look at those regulatory efficiency, service efficiency, and then added to that is the exchange rate management system, or the exchange rate issues that need to be addressed.
So addressing the foreign exchange issues and components that impact the power sector, service efficiency from the operators, whether it's generation or distribution, and of course, most importantly, the regulator. The role of the regulator is efficiency are critical things that we must bring on board to boost the power sector. And of course, transparency is also very important. But we'll keep tab on this sector because it is very vital to the economy, vital to the businesses, and of course, the household. And that's why we always have you and other experts to discuss further on this. Thank you very much, Mr. Muktar Mohammed, Energy Analyst, for this interesting conversation on rising energy costs and implications for business in Nigeria. Thank you once again for the time.
Thank you for always having me. Do have a pleasant day.
Thank you. And you too. Thank you. To our viewers, if you want to get further insights on this conversation around rising energy costs and implications for business in Nigeria, visit the ProShare website displayed on the screen and follow our social media platforms to engage further. Until we come your way again, enrich yourself with knowledge of socioeconomic developments around you, it is wise. I'm Ottoabasi Abasiekong. Thank you for watching and bye for now.